thank you for joining. As you can see, my mystery guests for today are Ben Myers and Eric Bailey. Both of them are accessibility experts and huge advocates. If you're at all active on Twitter, you've probably run into some of each of their content. But I'm going to go ahead and let you both introduce yourself. If Ben, you'd like to go first.
Absolutely. Howdy, I'm Ben. I write about accessibility sometimes, but where you've probably seen me around these days is I have a weekly Twitch stream called Some Antics, where I bring on guests to talk about accessibility and core web technologies. I'm super excited about accessibility. I myself am disabled, and yeah, I'm super excited to be here. So that's me, I guess. You'll also find me around in kind of core HTML spaces because I don't know, everyone needs a hobby.
Yeah. Love it. And Eric?
Hey, I'm Eric. Pronouns are he, him. I am a designer and I help maintain the a11y project, which is a open source reference for a lot of accessibility, digital accessibility related things. And Stephanie, like you said, I am on Twitter where I am too loud.
I didn't say you were too loud. No, it's great. I think I mentioned last stream. I most of what I know is from osmosis from folks like both of yourselves. So I appreciate everything that both of you are sharing. And I think just a mini tip before we kick off is, following these folks as well as seeing who they're following. That's my number one tip to figure out more about what's happening in accessibility if you happen to be new to this topic. So, what I have on screen here is kind of the intro page from the show website, which I will pop that in chat in just a moment. And the idea of the show is that I bring on mystery guests. And again, we have Ben Myers and Eric Bailey today. And this particular month, I'm focusing on accessibility related topics. So I'll also be posting the YouTube channel link where you can catch up on the previous two streams we had. Back in June, I also did a few shows on CSS. So it's something where I want to rotate through some topics that are of importance, mostly to front-end developers, but certainly something like accessibility impacts everyone, regardless of what you're doing in your job, if it's related to the web and even beyond the web. But of course, we are more web focused. So what's going to happen then is I'm going to switch us to this other screen. Is not only were my guests today and for each show not familiar with who they would be paired up with until just a few days before the show, but they also were not familiar until a few minutes ago with what would be exactly on the wheel. Now, they are areas related to their individual expertise and certainly things they're both passionate about in some way. We had a lot of good crossover, sort of serendipitously, with all of my mystery guests for this month. So that's been fun. And what I tend to do is I go in kind of my order of who joined the Zoom first. So, Ben, you'll have the first topic. An emotion
Oh
warning
boy.
here is that this wheel that I have on screen, it will spin. So once you hear them tell me to start it, it will have a spin motion until they tell me to stop it. So Ben, whenever you're ready, we can go ahead and get kicked off here.
Let's go for it.
All right, it's going to spin. Okay.
And stop.
All right, by a hair. The kickoff topic is ally education, disability
Oh
education.
gosh. This this is a big one. Um yeah, Stephanie asked us both for like topics of interest, and the like I contributed like two of these, right? But accessibility education is a topic I'm hugely interested in because accessibility is just such a big field, and there's no way anyone can ever be experts. And truly, I think even a lot of accessibility advocates can't be experts because the only people who are experts on disability experience and accessibility are people with lived experiences of their own disabilities. But as accessibility advocates, we do try to understand the broad scope of experiences related to disability, and we also have this position of like making sure other people in the industry are aware of what is and is not as accessible and why and how to test. And so this is something I've found to be a big challenge. in my day-to-day work, I sometimes contribute to like our new hire onboarding process. And I'm specifically like kind of the go-to for like, okay, we're gonna do accessibility day. And we're gonna bring Ben in and they'll teach the world about accessibility. And yeah, I guess some of the big takeaways I've had from that are that for one thing, the idea of having an accessibility day is itself broken, right? Like you need to be incorporating accessibility from the get-go, both to enforce like best practices, but also to enforce that this is something that we as a team or as a company or as some entity whatsoever, like that this is something we care about. Um, yeah, and I also I think that a lot of it needs to be much more hands-on. Like we as an industry need to be doing a better job at like teaching people how to validate with screen readers and other assistive technologies. Because a lot of times we teach like, oh, semantics is important, ARIA is a thing, and we like accessibility is a big thing, but then people try to do things that they think might help accessibility without knowing how to validate it, and so it feels like they're performing accessibility into the wind, like into the void a bit. I don't know, this is a big subject, and I think it might be a bit hard as like a starting point. Eric, do you have anything you want to add to that? I feel like I'd like to bounce off of someone a bit there.
Yeah. I mean, I completely agree with everything you've said. And like, I think representation is necessary for a good like accessibility experience. I think definitely like demonstrating with somebody who identifies as disabled how they use digital experiences is, in my experience, the most like compelling way to get somebody to understand like why you do what you do. And then in terms of education, you know, there's so many different subdisciplines, as Ben said, about where you can take disability practice in theory. And like I focus on mainly on web experiences, but like it since it's such a holistic concern, like it's in pretty much every industry and discipline. Um, in terms of like education itself, I think there's a lot of work to be done right now. My main concern slash focus is how it's surfaced in coding boot camps, which is how a lot of people get access to their first tech job. And kind of like Ben said, like you want to thread it in as something that you do as just best practice, as opposed to like having an accessibility day or like, for 30 minutes, we're going to talk about like what is an H1 and then never touch on it ever again.
Mhm.
And so that's kind of like where my head is at, but I am optimistic. I think there
Mhm.
has been more attention in the accessibility space. This event,
Yeah.
for example. So I'm glad to see it being present outside of accessibility specific circles, because that increases the chance people even learn about the topic before
Mhm.
somebody gets sued.
Yes, I
Mhm.
forgive me, I that kinda made me think of there was a recent article, forgive me, especially if it was by one of you, about how, yeah, that kind of just noticing that accessibility content doesn't really get outside of accessibility circles, which is very interesting. I think there's so much opportunity for people to attack it from so many angles.
Mhm.
I think from my own, just anecdotal how I observe accessibility content is, like I said, if I hadn't found like the wider network on Twitter and so forth, I definitely wouldn't see a lot of what I end up seeing because
Mhm.
it does feel a little bit locked away, interestingly, like whether that's locked away in
Mhm.
conferences or kind of niche blog posts, or, somebody's like, you need to follow WCAG. And then you're like, this is overwhelming. No, thank you. Nope,
Yes.
out of there. So super, super huge area of opportunity to just make it more, dare I say, accessible. But yeah, it's
Mhm.
I'm excited to see different people taking more angles. Next week I have a couple other folks who both are taking some interesting angles on the education. So definitely
Oh, good.
continuing topic of discussion. And real quick, do either of you off the top of your head, and if you think of them later, we can look at them later, but have any specific resources that you tend to recommend to folks getting started with accessibility? So I can pull those
Getting
up.
started. I feel like I link to Adrian Roselli's work an awful lot.
Yeah.
I think he hits a spot that I really enjoy, which is the like a lot of like his stuff tends to be like really well tested, and B, it provides like concrete examples, including markup that you can copy paste. So Adrian Roselli's work is one I end up shouting out a whole lot.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's one of the few authors I go to specifically, but anyway, you
Mm.
know, versus a general search.
Oh,
Um,
also there's one handy site called the a11y.com.
oh yeah, absolutely.
I sorry, had to snipe Eric there. But fantastic site there.
Eric, do you know a little bit about that one? I think maybe, I don't know.
A little bit, yeah. Plus one to Adrian also. Like I'll go to write something and then I'll be like, I should search Adrian's site to see. Like, darn, it's already there.
Mhm.
I think the W3C has some really good kind of intro pages as well. The names of them are blanking because the W3C is labyrinthine, but I will post some as a follow-up if you're interested. I'd also recommend WebAIM, which is a accessibility company that has been around for a very long time, has a lot of really well-written, well-structured content for a lot of the different topic areas, as well as an email list that is ancient and very high quality, which is a rare combination.
Oh man, I need to subscribe to that one. Um,
Yes.
it is fascinating the kind of gulf of content there can be, because like we're talking about like why isn't accessibility content always approachable, right? It felt for me at least for a long while, it felt like there were kind of two like like two sides of accessibility content that were on like opposite sides of like a ravine, right? Where it's like you've got 101 level content that's like, here's a introduction to alt text. Alt text is important, right? And then on the other side of the ravine, you have, well, today we're diving into the hyper specific specs, and we're going to look at like this one particular screen reader interaction in this one particular browser. It's going to be highly technical. And I think you need both of those kinds of content. But you also need some of the stuff in the middle that assumes that you have maybe some working knowledge of HTML, and maybe like you are like familiar with, you know, the alt attribute. But, you know, now you want to take it into like, well, how do you like you need something approachable to take it into like, well, how do you write good, meaningful alt text,
Mhm.
and that kind of stuff. Like there, you need kind of the middle stuff that assumes basic knowledge, but also isn't the hyper specific, hyper technical investigation work too. And I've been super excited to see more and more of that pop up. That's the space that like I try to occupy. That's the space I feel Ally Project lives in as well. Is that kind of like that middle ground?
Yeah, really good call outs. Yeah, so folks, if you're watching and you have been thinking, I have a topic that I learned about accessibility, yeah, write the post. I don't have credentials, you know, I'm a advanced amateur at best, I've said before, but you know, we need that post because we need your perspective. And, you know, the other awesome thing is folks like Ben or Eric, or at least Ben. I won't speak for you, Eric, but anyway, are willing to provide, you know, feedback and just because I've asked Ben before, I won't volunteer you is what I'm saying, Eric. But you know, people will give you feedback if you've you know interpret it incorrectly, because I think that's the other danger why folks stay away from it is you're worried about interpreting it incorrectly. And the thing is that's going to happen, right? And we just all can continue to learn. I mentioned this last stream, like we just all have to continue to learn and do our best. And there's just so many variables, even for something like alt text, to try to get it right is a moving target. So,
Yeah,
yeah, go ahead.
I would, yes, you could volunteer me. I would happily review anything anyone, you know, cares to send my way, if it's something I have knowledge about.
Mhm.
If it's not, I'll tell you because that's where damage gets done. But I'd also like to say that the A11y project does pay its contributors if you do have interest in writing a blog post, and things like Twitter follow count or like industry prominence doesn't factor in. So like if there's something that you personally have learned about accessibility, even if it's writing about how you learned about accessibility, you don't have to be an expert. We help you with editing your content. And like, the people that chime in have the expertise to help with that. But, hopefully I'm communicating that it's approachable, and we want a diversity of voices to help kind of carry the project forward. And compensating people for their effort is also very important to us.
Yeah, excellent. Thank you for sharing that. That's a really good opportunity. Cool. Do you mind if we move on to a new topic? That was a great one.
Do it.
All right. So, Eric, whenever you're ready, you can tell me to start. And again, if you've just joined, this wheel will spin. So, motion warning for that once Eric says start.
Let's do it.
All right. So, it's spinning.
And stop.
All right. Ooh, this is one you had added, Eric. Inclusive design alongside accessibility compliance.
Yeah. Now regretting submitting this. If you haven't heard of the term inclusive design, it's a approach to design, both like process and visual design and user experience. It was popularized by Kat Holmes. She has an excellent book about it, which I enthusiastically recommend. But to me, inclusive design is kind of a proactive model, where historically accessibility has been a reactive model, by which I mean, since accessibility has, historically been kind of an afterthought for a lot of organizations, they come in after the work has been done and then fix things for the better to prevent access barriers. Whereas inclusive design takes things from the conceptual stage. So like, I have an idea for a product, and as you're building the product, with a mind to disability, with a mind to, like these different intersectional factors, you say like, okay, well, how do we do this feature? If we go this route, what access barriers are present in doing it? So is this worth doing? Probably not. Is there another way to go about it? That saves a huge amount of time and effort down the line. And it also, more importantly, it pushes on that representation issue, which is the more diversity of experience, of background that you have in the design phase, the better your solutions are going to be.
Yeah, awesome. Excellent explanation. And this is something that has become more and more something that I've interestingly, this would probably be the best way to describe a lot of what I'm doing at my job, even though I'm not, again, an accessibility expert. But as a developer, if you have knowledge of accessibility, at least trying to help be that bridge between, if things aren't, we talked last episode about kind of shifting left some of these things as early as possible. But if that doesn't happen, then, the more you can learn and be that bridge, that's where this comes in. Because again, at the time that you have to worry about the compliance side, maybe that means you've been hit with an audit, then it may be a little too late to, or at least more effort to go back and rethink, okay, is this actually a design problem? And we need to, rework quite a bit more here to actually come to the best solution, as you were saying. But sorry, didn't mean to really take over the topic. Go ahead, Ben, with what's your thoughts on this topic?
Yeah, so first of all, I should specify I'm not a designer, but as Eric was talking, one of the things I was reminded of is this concept that this concept of the disability dongle. This is something that you hear talked about in disabled circles. It's a term coined by the disabled activist Liz Jackson. I'm putting a link to a definition to that in the chat. But effectively, a disability dongle is a disability aid that is meant to solve a real or perceived problem faced by by disabled people, but which was built without including disabled people in the design process. And oftentimes it comes with like media fanfare, and that's usually when you look behind when you read behind the lines, like that's why it was made, right? Was the media fanfare. the trouble is when you don't include disabled people in your design process, you end up building something you think is going to work, but which ends up actually making disabled users' lives harder. An example of this might be stair climbing wheelchairs. This is something that seems like a great idea, but then you look into like all the like you start investigating the like news stories about stair climbing wheelchairs that have been created, and you find out, well, A, they're super expensive, B, they don't actually work on every every set of stairs, C, they like angle the like disabled user at like a precarious angle such that they feel like they're always going to fall off. Like there's so many caveats and asterisks and footnotes to this that it's like it doesn't actually increase the like amount of the of good in the world. In fact, it actually makes people's lives harder. But you can run into a lot of those situations where when you think you're designing for disability, but not actually designing with disability, you end up actually creating a more exclusive product. And that was what was coming to mind as Eric was talking about inclusive design. Include disabled people in your advocacy.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Big Liz Jackson fan over here. Yeah.
Awesome. Any other thoughts, Eric, before we move to the next topic?
So let's move on.
All right. Yeah. All right. So we're back to Ben. Again, a motion warning for this wheel.
Oh boy. Spin it.
All right. It's going to spin. Here we go.
Stop.
All right.
I don't know why I looked at my preview of the wheel, which is a stationary image. I'm like, oh, where did it land?
Well, it landed on exactly the same thing, so respin.
Okay.
All right, whenever you're ready.
And stop.
Oh, I just started it, sorry.
And stop.
All right. Well, anyway, spinner's choice. So you can look at your static wheel. You can either choose from there or something else that has come to mind for you recently.
Oh man. Eric, you want to spend some time talking about semantic markup? That sound like fun to you?
Do I?
That is the face of someone who has lived many years of experience with this.
Love it.
Yeah, let's talk about some semantics. Accessibility is broad, and I think oftentimes there is a way in which many accessibility advocates, and I will include myself in that number, paint web accessibility as like, oh, it's just about semantics, right? No, there's so much more to that. But semantic markup is just always a topic that I've really enjoyed because, okay, general content warning here for topics of food. I know that that's something that people can find uncomfortable, but I'm going to talk a bit about food and specifically sushi, because I have heard this thing about high class like sushi restaurants, or even really any like high class like first rate restaurant. They're like the chefs there are really they're really good at their job, right? But that's not just in the preparation of the materials. One of the things that makes a high class restaurant high class is that they're able to procure the finest quality ingredients, right? And that is a key part. Like that is a part of why the chicken you cook at home does not taste as good as the chicken in the restaurant. The other reason is that the restaurant chicken has a lot of butter, but the restaurant is able to procure high quality chicken, or sushi restaurants can get high quality fish. And it's those ingredients, getting the absolute being particular about those ingredients allows for a much higher quality meal. And in the same way, I think it's important to be very conscious of how the materials we use, the building blocks we use to create our user experiences, really do impact the end experience. If we go with the cheapest ingredients, we're only ever going to meet the top level, the glass ceiling of like what those ingredients are able to accomplish. And so that's one way I think of semantics. The other way I've been thinking about it lately is as a political speech, almost, because politicians give speeches and they hopefully are picking their words very carefully. right? Because they're about to deliver a speech to a wide population of people with lived experiences who are all prone to interpret that speech in their own and like with their own life experiences. And um I think you have to be particular about the words you choose there because of that interpretation. And similarly, we've got, you know, we here are in the position of being politicians, the incredibly enviable position there. We're crafting a speech and it's going to go out to a whole bunch of users on a whole bunch of devices with a whole bunch of assistive technologies. That's it's going to get interpreted in ways we may never predict, right? But if we're being very particular about our words that we're using, we can hopefully get a more precise and meaningful speech in that way. I don't know. I've just like been bouncing around these like two analogies in my head. And yeah, semantics is like sushi, but also political speeches. It all makes sense, I promise.
Yeah. We're with you. Eric, what's your thoughts?
Well, I know what I'm ordering for dinner tonight.
Oh gosh.
A politician?
um, hard pass. Yeah. To build off of what Ben said, you know, every web experience should be a expensive sushi restaurant, because another important thing about semantics and how it relates to accessibility is a lot of the time we see this, you know, accessibility kind of brought to us in terms of like, well, you know, can you pay your taxes? Can you do, you know, check what the trash takeout, you know, schedule is for where you live, like government facing things. But the web is infrastructure now, and it's important to note that like accessible semantic experiences map directly to somebody's quality of life, and that you can't know who's visiting your site or what experiences or conditions they're you know they have. But what you can do is be a welcoming host, and part of that to me is, you know, structuring your content in a way that works for the widest swath of, you know, lived experiences. The other thing I think is an uncomfortable thing to bring up, but also true, is semantic markup isn't accessible markup. Semantic markup is semantic markup. So you can make an inaccessible experience with semantic markup just as easily as you can make a inaccessible experience with non-semantic markup. The good news there is exactly what Ben said, which is prioritizing intent, knowing what elements you're using and why. And that just definitely increases the chances of, you know, promoting access as opposed to withholding it. It's a pretty small language, so you know, there's not a lot of words to learn, so it's not as tough or as daunting as hopefully I'm making it sound.
There's something like 100 words, which I have to look into like child development, but I think most kids learn 100 words within like 2 years, I think.
Yeah.
That is very unscientific of me. I'd have to look it up, but like, yeah.
Oh, the other thing about semantic HTML that I really like is interoperability, which is, I think, a disability adjacent concern, but definitely like a nerdy concern, which is I can open a web page from year one of the internet and look at it in my browser and it still works. And I challenge you to think of other technologies that are capable of doing that.
Yeah.
And then the other thing is I don't know what the future is going to be.
Mhm.
But if I stick to a standard, that future is probably going to map to something that, you know, promotes consistency. So it's like maybe, you know, maybe the mirror in my bathroom is going to get a little computer in it, and I can see, you know, the news for the day. And like, how do you describe news? What is news? Well, we have this suite of markup that we can use to consume this content. And that's really powerful. That's really cool.
I'm reminded there of Bruce Lawson's article, putting that in the chat as well, but where he's like, yo, I designed my site years and years ago before smartwatches were a thing, but I designed it with semantics. And then smartwatches became a thing and my site just worked.
Yeah. Exactly. I was thinking about that. I was thinking about reader mode. and it might be a dirty word, but I was thinking about SEO. But I mean, when you're trying to impart the value, these are the things we sometimes have to bring up, right? So, um, yeah, it's interesting too to me. To your point, Eric, of y choosing semantic elements may not actually be for the best in some instances. I think that takes us back to the idea of the inclusive design and kind of stepping back and, or is this ultimately the best decision? I recently, well, by which I mean this morning, we were working on getting Axe Linter integrated into our build process, and so we had an error come up that we shouldn't restyle paragraphs to look like headings, which is a valid error. But sometimes, for example, we choose that option because a heading would be incorrect semantically. But at the same time, are we, stepping back further, are we structuring the content and the hierarchy there for the best overall anyway, So
Mhm.
it's kind of, yeah, checking it out and uh, being able to evaluate that. And, the more you learn, again, you could make those better decisions or do your best attempt to make the right call there. Um, and so all good stuff. This is a great article. I remember reading that little while ago. It's from a while ago, but it's still completely valid for what we're seeing today. And so cool. Any last thoughts on that topic?
Please care about your HTML. Solid foundations are a necessary part of solid experiences.
Yep. Cool. All right. Well, over to you, Eric. Whenever you're ready, the wheel will spin for folks new to the stream.
Fire it up
All right, here it goes.
and stop.
All right, another one from you, Eric, which I was super interested you have on the wheel. It's definitely different from what we've talked about so far on the show. Cognitive accessibility.
Yeah. So the kind of the disciplines of at least web accessibility, digital accessibility, map to 4 criteria, which are referred to as POUR. That stands for perceivable, operable, understandable, and robust. And these are like the 4 kind of big buckets that you evaluate digital experiences. So, perceivable is, can I see this? Can I actually read it? Robust is it resilient? Is it going to work in different contexts and different technologies? Understandable and operable, in my experience, oftentimes are where cognitive accessibility issues crop up. And just to clarify, cognitive accessibility, involves how you, perceive, understand, and kind of extrapolate on concepts. So, it may manifest with, biological or circumstantial disability, such as like ADHD or depression. And then the other interesting thing is cognitive accessibility is actually the most prevalent disability in the world. So the disability community for web experiences, at least, tends to focus on screen reader experience because that's something that you can kind of test and it can be kind of objective in that either it reads it or it doesn't. That's actually the minority. Cognitive is the majority, and it is very difficult to test for because it manifests differently for different people in different ways. That being said, there are some things you can do to make your designs and your experiences friendly towards cognitive considerations. And a lot of it is honestly just good design, which is like structuring your things in a predictable, logical way, getting rid of your jargon. If you have complicated concepts, breaking them down, like all, that good stuff. It's an area I have a lot of interest in, and I'm still definitely exploring it. And so, like, my friend Shell Little does a lot of speaking about it, and she's somebody I definitely look up to in the industry who does a lot of kind of talking and writing and promotion about it. So I'm a fan.
Awesome. Yeah, it was a great overview. Anything to add from you, Ben?
this is something that I know very little about. So I'm just excited to be here and learning from Eric.
Yeah, I'm also definitely less familiar. I'm familiar with the POUR acronym. I just found a small resource to throw up on screen for anyone else unfamiliar with it. I know it's a key part of. I was trying to find the actual like WCAG page about it. So like this is a core thing for anybody unfamiliar. This is not kind of a random theory. This is like the backbone of the whole deal, really. Um, and all the success criterions fit under this. Is that correct? Is that a correct statement?
Yeah.
Definitely something just from a essential level to get familiar with what each of these mean. Um, yeah, great overview. Eric, do you have a talk on this? I found your one about the performance side, which we might get to as a topic, but
The performance one kind of touches on it.
okay.
The back half of it references NASA, which is the place that makes things go into space. Spent its budget on a thing called the task load index, which is kind of a way to evaluate the amount of kind of cognitive overhead and processing power that you can do when doing stuff.
Mm.
And this is kind of again where the intersectional nature of disability comes in, which is like if you have too many plates to juggle, things are going to slip. You're gonna make mistakes. In this situation, I'd say you're cognitively impaired by way of circumstance, which is just like there's not enough brain power to go around.
Mm.
That isn't to diminish biological disability. It's more just it's very interesting to see an organization that does very serious things with very smart people, putting money into researching this because it has a direct effect on outcomes. The other, like, kind of the flip side of this is that's a very technical thing, and like, we make web for people, and people is basically the world at this point because the internet is the world. And most people aren't technical the way we're technical. And so if you've ever struggled or seen somebody struggle with an interface that just doesn't make sense or doesn't behave the way you'd expect it to, that's an example of kind of a cognitive, operable and understandable failures, like broad category. And the thing that really irritates me about this is people internalize these failures. So it's not this is poorly made, it's I couldn't do this.
Mm.
And typically it's the complete opposite, which was like this was constructed without due diligence and is failing people who are then taking that and internalizing it, and that may prevent them from participating in these things, and that really stinks.
Yeah, that's a really good way to frame it and think about it. That um, I I have felt that way myself, right? We've all we've all felt that way, even as folks familiar with using digital technologies. So, extremely good point. Well, we're getting close to the end of time. Um, let's see. I'm flipping back to the wheel on my side. I think we covered some good highlights here. The one I
Yeah.
usually like to kind of end on, if we don't land on it already on the wheel, is why do you do it? Why do you do whatever you do with accessibility, advocate for it, and so forth? And Ben, you can go first on that one.
Oh gosh. So part of it is just I really enjoy it, right? It sits at the cornerstone of a lot of things I love, right? There's admittedly there is a technical aspect to it that I really love, and I don't know that this is always brought up in accessibility places, like, but I love the technical side of being able to like dig through the specs and that kind of stuff. I enjoy that side, but there's also just like this confluence of like you're building a user experience or you're improving the user experience for people who really need it. Like oftentimes disabled people are disenfranchised. I have the I currently work at a bank, and so if people can't use the pages that I work on, they can't access their finances. Right? That's like that is creating a meaningful like change for them, right? It's meaningfully improving their lives to be able to work on that. And yeah, I I really, really do enjoy getting to just kind of improve that experience. I think that the world would be a better place if it's more accessible for sure.
Yeah, awesome. About yourself, Eric?
Just keep agreeing with Ben.
Yeah.
Don't worry. We'll after this is all done, we'll have the big fight. We'll
Yeah.
disagree on something.
Yeah.
Boston folks don't know how to do barbecue. Is
Yeah.
that anything?
No, that you're spot on.
Okay.
It's terrible.
Come to Texas, I'll feed you.
Yeah. Come to Boston, I'll disappoint you. Yeah, I as a designer, I started out kind of being really interested in usability and like where the rubber hits the road in terms of like, what does this do? And is this the best possible way for this to do what it does? And early on, I had exposure to the WCAG through a job, and I was like, oh my God, this is a cheat sheet. Like, this is, so they spelled it all out for me. And then as I kind of explored the disability spaces online that I got access to, it really kind of clarified and kind of consolidated my interests and where I want to go and what I want to do. And like Ben said, it hits on technical curiosity. It hits on like good design. It hits on the human aspect, which I think is the most important one, which is like the reason to do this is quite literally to give or take away access for somebody that's just trying to live their life, and that's huge. That's really powerful. And I'm fortunate enough to be able to do that. So it's been very the community has been very welcoming and accepting for me, and I'm very grateful for that.
Before we end, anything else you are both up to? Anything you want to plug? This is definitely a time for you to share those kinds of things as well.
Go ahead, Eric.
Yeah, so if you like the watching people talk about things accessibility related online, there is an upcoming conference, Inclusive Design 24, and ID24, you might have heard it called, but it is 24 hours of accessibility and inclusive design related talks. It's coming up mid-September. I'm blanking on the date because I've been put on the spot.
23rd.
But 23rd, thank you. But I'll be helping to run it, and I'm really excited for this year's lineup. And if that's something you want to tune in for a little bit, that'd be awesome.
Cool. Yeah, I enjoyed the ones I caught last year, so it definitely is on my list. And they will all end up on YouTube later, right? If you don't stay up the 24 hours.
Yeah.
So
I encourage you not to stay up the 24 hours.
Yeah. Cool.
Also, in the vein of if you like watching people on Twitch talking about accessibility for an hour or so, I've got a weekly Twitch stream. It's twitch.tv/someanticsdev. Semantics is a weekly show where I bring on guests to talk about accessibility and or core web technologies in a hands-on way. And so that's a thing I do. I can see my moderator has just put a few of my cat emotes in there. Thank you, Michael.
I just got Semantics. That's amazing.
It's such a gift to be able to watch this. I'm going to dunk on Alex Trost, who's in the chat. Like I was bringing him on and he was talking about that on his show. Like, oh, I'm going to be on Semantics. And then just the like dawning realization. So good to watch. What a gift.
Yes. Clipped for eternity. Yes. Awesome. Well, thank you both again. It was great to have you on and to have this little virtual meeting, and thanks to everybody else for tuning in today, and hope you learned some new things today, some new things to think about. I think this was a very unique set of topics that we got to today. Have a wonderful rest of your day, and see you next week.
Bye, y'all.
Hi, thanks for having me.